We've got time to ask some more questions of the panel, specifically related to the work we've talked today in relation to the workforce safeguards. I hope you agree that the kind of the day has helpfully or hopefully really kind of highlighted the kind of underpinning rationale and reasons for some of the new policy direction, also the kind of offer of support that goes into organisations, and also importantly, I think particularly with such powerful testimony this afternoon, I think really truly highlighting the kind of the nature and the scope of the challenges and how important they are to get these decisions right, the impact they have on individuals on the front line, but also the impact they have on leaders in kind of working in environments where these are quite challenging. So we've probably got about 10 minutes or so, 10 or 15 minutes so for kind of a panel discussion and debate. I'm really conscious that you have a long way to go, so we will kind of wrap up early, but I do hope that we can probably get you a little bit earlier at 3:30 before you can get to trains and things. So I'll open up the kind of discussion. Are there any immediate questions from colleagues in the audience?
I can't see. Is Helen still there?
She is, yes.
Hi, Helen. My name's Tina Lloyd from East Sussex Healthcare Trust. I'm just interested to know what your feeling is about the relationship between your a chief exec, that's not some of yours, and the director of HR in the HR department. I think they get involved in some decision making and details, and whether that's appropriate.
It very much depends on the issue, I think. I don't think across the board it is appropriate because that shouldn't be what they're there to do. But historically we've seen that things get missed and lost in translation, and sometimes things have to be escalated right up to the top. A, to get a sensible decision, B, to have ownership from an executive level, and I think C as well, so that it gives confidence and some faith to the staff involved that things are not getting lost in the middle. But ideally, it shouldn't have to go there, I don't think. But I think we're not to the place, I mean, that again is all about the cultural change drive. I think we need to get to a place where, I always say this, I'm talking myself out of a job because I really don't think we need people like me or shouldn't need people like me. Staff should be just speaking up as a matter of course. It should be responded to appropriately and effectively. That should then be learning across the whole of the organisation. And the correct decisions and ownership should be taken from the board. But we saw at Mid-Staffs that didn't happen. We see, as I said, in pockets and elements of other places that's not happening. So it very much depends on the situation, but I would hope that that's in the minority rather than the majority of cases.
Brilliant, thank you, Helene. Any further questions? We've lady there, and then yes.
Thank you. I think I'm the only doctor in the room. I'm a Deputy Medical Director at Dartford in Rewsham. You started the day, it's addressed to you, Professor. You started the day saying that it was about doctors and nurses, but we talked mainly about nursing staff. Yet, 46% of the GMC registered doctors were not trained in this country. 20% are EU nationals that are facing main issues, and I know there are nursing staff. What is NHSI going to do to help the process for all these doctors to remain in this country? And when the Commonwealth doctors thought that the doors would be open to them widely, and they are not. How are we going to square the circle that we don't have enough doctors? Because if you think that bank nurses or agency nurses cost a lot, when you look at the line of agency doctors, it is horrendous.
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you for that. So a couple of things. One, I think there's a natural tendency in these kind of conferences to focus in on kind of the professional aspects of kind of nursing, because that is something that has dominated the kind of NHS landscape when we talk about when we talk about workforce issues. But what I hope to try to do today, particularly in the early phases, is saying that actually these pressures and these issues exist across the entire workforce, and we need to think much more broadly about developing workforce safeguards at board level that don't just focus in on nursing, because actually that takes sight off scientists, midwives, AHPs and other people equally have an important impact in the quality and the clinical standards alongside IT professionals and a range of others. So today was about exposing it, but we've used a number of examples, particularly particularly from the nursing field. What is NHSI doing? Well, it's a really important question, because you're absolutely right. I mean, the NHS has for a long time required the services of overseas staff and EEA staff working within the NHS. And there have been many public statements, both by NHS leaders, to say that actually we have to have a system that ensures that we're able to continue to access the support of these colleagues from across the globe in supporting the NHS. You'll have seen very recently that a number of organisations have already made a commitment in relation to supporting any residence fees, as well as also residency process. As NHSI, we're working currently directly with government, as and when information in relation to our detachment, as it were, from policy terms from the European Union, we are clear, then we'll be able to issue guidance that directly supports organisations. But I'm delighted that many organisations have already given a clear commitment to their staff, because that's absolutely what we should be sending the message for.
I know, but the issue is that we have relied too much on doctors from abroad. We have created 1,000 medical school places this year, but we were not going to reap the reward of that for many years to come. And the doctors don't want to come here anymore. So it is really a big issue.
It is.
That we're facing, faced with on medical rota, A&E rota, every day.
Yeah, no, it's a very good point. So it is not unreasonable for one of the 10 largest economies in the world to have a safe and sustainable and self-sufficient model of healthcare worker development and training within our country. Everybody I've spoken to is senior leadership across the NHS and in the Department of Health and Social Security. Have absolutely health and social care. That takes me back to DHSS. I was just thinking, that shows my age a little bit. Have been very, very clear that that's a sustainable model is absolutely. However, in the short term, we are going to rely on our overseas colleagues in supporting what we do. So there are 3 strategies that we can effectively deploy in the short term. One is absolutely make sure that we are retaining the high quality overseas and EEA staff that are working within the NHS, and that has to be about organisations and the wider NHS supporting them in practice and making sure that they do feel valued. I understand that some colleagues don't as a result of that, and I think that's extremely sad and disappointing. We will require in the short term to ensure that we work directly with colleagues at the Home Office and the Foreign Commonwealth Office to ensure that actually we can adequately address some of our supply challenges by making life easier. But obviously that is government policy decision, so we await the government's decision in relation to things like visas. We've had some very encouraging changes to things like Cap 2 visas, etc. But actually we need to make some of those processes more streamlined to ensure that we're able to bring more colleagues in than are leaving. And importantly, we absolutely need to work on some of the, what in case of the long-term plan, there's an engagement process involved at the moment, particularly around workforce, and in there is a very clear indication in relation to the overseas requirement in terms of support. One suggestion colleagues from HEE are looking at in their global market team is how they can go abroad in both an ethical and a sustainable way to recruit colleagues. There's a number of examples where both nurses and doctors are coming to work in the NHS, but doing it in a structured way and doing it in a way that isn't necessarily denuding very, very critical healthcare workers from other parts of the world. So there are a number of things we need to do in the short term. I think the general view is absolutely our overseas staff are highly prized, highly valued, and my personal commitment is to work with DHSC, other arm's length bodies to ensure that we're able to make that transition as soon as possible, but culturally make sure that they feel valued, but importantly make sure their skills are retained within the NHS. Great. Next question, lady at the front.
Thank you very much. Mark, just to say, first of all, fantastic programme today, and it's been well worth taking the time out to come to that, so thank you, and those speakers. I've got 2 questions, and I don't mean to hog the floor, but the first one is, in terms of ward manager, leader, matron type roles, I find the issues are, in terms of raising concerns, that
when staff come to them, they don't have the skills to manage that, and they're worried because they want to have the right answer and they want to be able to put it all right, and nurses tend to want to do that, don't they? So that's where I've been focusing quite a lot of my attention in developing the skills. I just didn't know whether Michelle or Helena had any views on what you've been doing to help with that. And the second point is around care hours per patient day and the publication of the data.
Of course.
I find it quite hard to find, and I'm just wondering what the public yet have said about that data,
Okay.
if it's of any value to it.
So question first to the panel. I think you could all probably have a view on kind of ward and department leadership, and your first question, then I'll answer the CHPPD one. Yeah, great. Michelle, do you want to start first, and then Emma and Helene?
From my perspective, Lynn, it really has been about engaging them and talking to them and finding out what they want to do. So I've developed a development programme, if you like, for our ward leaders, for Band 7s and above. And what we're focusing on is not just the nurses, but on everybody at that level. So it's a multidisciplinary development. And part of that is the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian talking to them about how to have difficult conversations and all of those things that you would think, and we all did as a nurse, but actually the way that things have moved forward, we need to do much more of it. So we are doing much more sort of practical training. From my own perspective, it's about, I walk all the wards. I have a programme of walking all the wards, and I talk to people specifically about that. What's the biggest risk? What's your sickest patient? What are you worried about the most? What's on your risk register? And to get them into that conversation, and then when I meet with them, that's always at the top of the agenda. What data have you had this week? How can we share that? What are you really worried about? Tell me. And I can't always sort it out, but they do have that ear, if you like. And in honesty, all of our exec team have a complete open door policy, so they can go to any one of us for that. But and sometimes, and I say this in a positive way, sometimes it does mean as an executive, you do get the little bits that actually somebody else should be sorting out, but at least they're talking to somebody, and I'll take that until we've got it rolled out. So from my perspective, it is about professional training for them, and then about reminding them all the time about the importance of it, about their professional responsibility to do it, but giving them the time to be able to speak out and say, you know what, Michelle, this just isn't right. And if they do raise issues like that all the time, then I will say I'm going to be down within 3 days to come onto your ward, talk to you about it, have a look what's going off, and let's see what we can do. We can't always sort it out, but I do make that commitment. So
Brilliant, thank you. Emma?
Yeah. So I would agree with a lot of that as well. When I was a director of nursing, I would meet with my Band 7s separately to my matrons, and I also met with my Band 2s and 5s as well. We used to look at the staff survey and see where different departments, when you get it down to your ward level detail, which different departments were having difficulties with their management or their leadership. And often when you sort of delve into it, as we all know, it's not, generally speaking, due to not wanting to be a good leader and supportive leader. Lots of our Band 7s are escalated into their positions. They don't have the skills necessarily to do the job that we ask them to do. They just happen to be the best that there are and the ones that want to do more and further develop their career. So it was about also speaking to the Band 7s as well as the 2s and 5s, openly, honestly, and discreetly often as well, about what they felt they needed. And there probably wasn't one ward sister in my experience that didn't know their shortfalls or didn't know what they found difficult to manage and deal with. And then we did exactly the same. We did a bespoke development programme for our ward sisters, and then our 6s who were going to be our ward sisters going forward to help to sort of skill them really to deal with those situations. But that's what we did.
Great, thank you. Helene?
I don't think I have much more actually, because I agree wholeheartedly with all of that. I think the point particularly around some who have been escalated into roles that perhaps they're not ready for and perhaps they don't really want. I've spoken to quite a few Band 7 and above leaders who were sort of forced through management of change to take that role because they've reached their sort of threshold as a clinician and they're exceptional as a clinician, and then they were told, well, if you want to progress further or potentially be down-banded, you have to now lead the team. So they were kind of forced into it and then didn't necessarily have the wraparound support to be able to do that. So there is something about that. And I think there is something as well about the fact that I agree again that nobody goes to work to do a bad job. I really don't believe they do. And a lot of it is sometimes around people just not appreciating perhaps how they're coming across as a leader. So it's about giving them that early opportunity to sort of hold the mirror up, reflect, and then give them the support to perhaps change their manner, their behaviour, their responses to things, and then hopefully that can help improve cultures so that they can support their staff to raise concerns. But furthermore, as your point was, that if they don't necessarily have the tools or the permission to solve a problem, they need to feel enabled and empowered to raise that up further, rather than the pushback down of, well, it's your team, you sort it out, or well, are you failing, can't you sort it out? And that's how they feel, so they hold it and they don't do very much with it. So then the staff below are then coming to people like me, and I'm going to the ward manager and they're saying, I know, or I have tried to escalate it, but I'm not getting anything. And so again, that's where we come in to escalate it up further. But really, we want to not have that, and we want them to feel empowered and enabled to escalate appropriately, not be punished for doing so, and be supportive. And I think that again is a measure of whether you've got the culture right or not. So hopefully that is what's happening.
Yeah, thank you, Helen. So in regards to CHPD, so we've in the acute sector and specialist trust, we've been collecting it for about 18 months, 2 years now. It went live very recently in being publicly displayed. There was a clear commitment from the Secretary of State, as was then Jeremy Hunt, to move from planned and actual, which I think a lot of us understood as being, yes, that's great for a period in time, but it doesn't necessarily tell us any more detail than the plan that was implemented was correct. Doesn't tell you whether the plan was correct in its entirety. So Lord Carter and the team went away. They learned from the New South Wales model to bring that back. So Care Hours for Patient Day is, for those who don't know, is a composite measure of both registered nursing time and also healthcare support worker time. It's going to be an evolving measure, so we will be including allied health professionals to that number eventually, where they are substantively included within the establishment. And importantly, as a separate line of data, that the nursing associates, when they graduate and qualify, will be a separate line within the data. So we'll absolutely be able to have a very granular view and picture around the types of input hours that go into certain clinical environments itself. The caveats around that are that they are now published on My NHS and NHS Choices. So if you search for your individual organisation, you'll get the little banner come up with all of the different yes, no's, green, reds, etc. In there is CHPPD under one of the quality measures. You do have to choose it because it comes up with a default set of measures automatically. It does give you your aggregate CHPPD measure as an organisation, and I've stood on many public stages and say that measure, measuring one organisation against another, isn't what you should do, but what it does allow you is to click on that and drill down even further to look at the number of care hours input that goes into individual organisations, split out between registered nurses and healthcare support workers. So we've had to do a lot of work with NHS Digital. There is there's some patient and service user explanation sheets in relation to what CHPPD does. It is quite complex. I still have lots of conversations with clinicians up and down the country who get in a bit of a pickle in understanding what it can and can't do. It does not measure acuity. It's not a proxy for acuity. It just purely measures the input hours in that clinical environment. So it doesn't require you to change things like acuity tools, etc., because it won't derive that as an end result. It just does enable you to look on a daily and weekly basis the types of organisational model you have as to whether or not one specialty can be looked at compared to another, to look for warranted and unwarranted variation. Mental Health and Community will be published in January, so those organisations will have the same public-facing nature. I personally haven't had any contacts, even though my name's on it, from service users, clients or the public in relation to the CHPPD measure, nor at this stage have I had any other interest from press or others in relation to do that. I have had a huge amount of interest from nursing colleagues up and down the country as to saying, why, what's this, what does it mean, why is mine different, why is this, and my board's asking me to do X, Y, and Z. So I'm more than happy to engage with anybody in relation to CHPPD, but there's some clear things it can do, there's some clear things that people think it can do that it can't, and there's some clear things that you shouldn't do with it as a result. And again, one of the key things is about educating and supporting people in terms of making those kind of right decisions. So, but at this stage, no, I haven't had a great deal of patient feedback. So we've currently got 5 minutes. As chair's prerogative, I have got 3 questions for the panel before I let them go. So I'm going to start with Helene at this time and say, Helene, could this happen again?
Yes. I think I alluded to that earlier in that I mean, I think it would have to be quite exceptional again. And as I said, you know, Mid-Staffs just did sort of tick all the boxes as a perfect storm. So whether we'll see quite the like of that again, I don't know. I hope not. And I think, you know, 5 years on since the Francis report was published, I think there's been a huge amount of learning and willingness to learn and change and put things in place to try and prevent it happening again. But I'm still really saddened quite frequently, really, not just in my own organisation, I hasten to add, but across the NHS, because obviously I'm linking so closely with other guardians and other regulators and so on throughout the country, and still really concerned about a lot of the behaviours that go on in the NHS. And I think that's our greatest sticking point now, because I think the pressure's always going to be there. In fact, it's ever increasing, isn't it, in terms of funding cuts, in terms of demand. But I think the behaviour of some people in the NHS, and I hasten to add it's only some, it is the minority, absolutely, but for a health care environment, it shocks me how little people do seem to care, or at the very least they might be great with their patients, which is brilliant, but they're really bad at interacting and having decent relationships with their colleagues, and it really shocks me and confuses me, actually. I don't understand why. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around that, and I understand why a lot of it happens, because I said earlier, the pressure's on, people are just head down, just trying to get the job done under really difficult circumstances. But as I said before, my take-home message is, if we don't look after the staff, if we don't look after each other, you know, we can't do this, and we won't have an NHS for another 70 years. So for me, it really is about sort of trying to look around and not expect perfection, and everybody has a bad day now and again, but just looking at how we behaved ourselves and try and respectfully call people out who are not behaving in an appropriate way, but crucially say, you know, can I help? Do you need some support with something? And just try and help change that culture in that way. And I think if we do that, there's a lot less likelihood of it happening again.
Brilliant. Thank you. Emma, you've been quite close to the kind of safeguards document, the work we've kind of engaged a lot with the system. As a kind of director of nursing, how important is this document to get into boards for them to understand, and how to kind of prevent some of these issues occurring?
Well, I think it's hugely critical that the boards take a joint sort of responsibility with making sure that these recommendations are implemented and support each other in doing so. I think that that's critical as well. I know it sort of says a lot. I guess there's one doctor in the room and a room full of nursing colleagues, and it's fantastic to see some HR colleagues here as well. But this has always been sort of left to nursing directors to manage and hold the risk and not sleep at night, I think, fairly often, actually, when they're not only battling with sort of staff to try and support them through these staffing issues, but also trying to convince the board that this is the right way to do things. So I think it's absolutely critical. We've got stronger board engagement. I'm so thrilled that that's now going to happen, because we will be assessing that accordingly, and hopefully it will make some huge progress by also bringing on other staff groups like our medics, like our AHPs, and anyone really that delivers care to our patients. So I think it's very positive and hopefully very operational, able to be operationalised for you guys as well. So.
Brilliant. Emma, thank you. And the final question to Michelle, which is, you've talked a lot about your challenges today and been very open and candid in all of the things that say. So I want to finish on a high note and say, what are you most proud of in all you've achieved with you and your team over the last year?
Oh, lovely question. How long have you got? I've got a list, Mark, of what I'm proud of. I think what I'm most proud of is the resilience of the teams. So they are we do get constant scrutiny when you work in an organisation like ours. You get, as I said before, people turning up all the time. So the teams are so resilient. They come back day in, day out. They do have a moan, but actually they do what absolutely the best they can. And that shows. So we're not perfect in any way, but as I said earlier, our pressure ulcers are better than the national average. Our falls work is better than the national average. Because of the work that we've been doing, HSMR is coming down, so we know that we're doing the right thing for patients. So I think I would say that the teams are just you know, the most resilient, and they keep turning up and doing a brilliant job. Can I just say one thing?
Of course
I
you
can't help myself, because I was talking to Mandy about this before, and one of the things that I wanted to do, and I leave you with this as something to think about. When I first started, I wanted to try and engage the nursing workforce a bit more than we had done. So the two things that you talk to nurses about if you want to engage them: car parking, always a winner. What a nightmare, leave that one alone. Uniforms. Uniforms! Let's have a conversation about uniforms.
Christmas off
So,
duty.
Christmas off duty is a good one, I'll leave that one alone as well. So I decided to go for uniforms, and Mandy knows this story. So we were looking around at uniforms, what we could do, what we can't do. We haven't got any money, so we've got to do this on the cheap, you know, so make sure that we can get them right. And one of our heads of nursing was in one of our hospitals, walking through the main reception. And she saw an agency nurse stood there, because there's a little cafe thing, stood at the cafe thing waiting to get a coffee or whatever it was. And she had a really nice grey uniform on with a pink stripe. I remember this distinctly, grey with a pink stripe, and thought, this is it. This is the one to go for. This is going to be blooming lovely, very professional. Went over to it and said, oh, you know, hello, my name is Linda, I'm the head of nursing here, and what agency do you work for? Because I really like your uniform. And she said, oh, I'm not an agency nurse. And she said, oh, really, where do you work? And she said, oh, I work on the 5th floor. And she said, well, why are you wearing that uniform then? She said, because I don't like the ones that you provide, so I've bought my own. This is at Pilgrim, and there is a uniform shop on the high street in Boston. Her and a couple of her colleagues had been down there, bought this beautiful uniform, and had been wearing it for 14 years. So when you want to engage people, talk about uniforms, you find out a whole host of stuff.
Fantastic. What a great way to finish it, and thank you to the panel. If we could give a panel a round of applause, thank you. I believe Michelle does like after dinner speeches and stuff like that. She's been really funny today. So just a very, very quick wrap up, and I'll get you guys out. I just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's given their time today. Behind the scenes, there is a team who have done a phenomenal job in bringing all of this together. I'm immensely proud of my workforce team at NHSI. Tony and everybody, you've done a fantastic job in making this event work, getting the speakers together and getting everybody here. It's fantastic. So thank you very, very much for all of your support to do that. I hope it's been able to bring the kind of a policy document alive. There's something that we kind of send out and you go, oh great, another one. But I really wanted you to kind of get to the understanding that we've had engaging with the system, understanding the issues and challenges that are out there, and highlight how we want this document to work in practice, how we want to support you. So for the next year, we're going to be actively engaging with you to make sure that we can help embed this within your organisational governance models. Ask when you need help. Please come to us. We'll be able to find those who have helped solve problems that you're experiencing. So we can get this right. So in about 12 months' time, we'll be able to move to a national model of assurance in relation to safe and effective staffing across the NHS, which I think will be a phenomenal shift in position from where we currently are at the moment. That's about understanding risk. It's an understanding leadership. And I think you've heard from some phenomenal speakers today that really have kind of highlighted and articulated why it's so important to get right, because it's about those patients, those families, those service users and clients out there each and every day. We've got to get it right for that. I really do appreciate your time today. We do have an evaluation form. You often, at the end of the day, we go, oh, blimey, can I get it done and get out quite quickly? They are really, really important to us. We fundamentally change all of our programs of masterclasses as a result of the feedback. If we're not getting it right, please tell us. Absolutely, if we're getting it right, please let us know so we can make sure that our programs are exactly giving you what you need to be today. So if you could fill those in and either leave them on your chairs and leave them at the back before you go, that would be great. Once again, thank you very much to the AV team, and also importantly to Juries In for hosting us today. I really do appreciate it, and I wish you a safe onward journey back home or back to work for some of you, and thank you very much for your time today.